Hi, my name is Matt Chapdelaine. You've just downloaded my own Harada grid. Hopefully, you've had a chance to read the article and learn a little bit more about how Shohei Ohtani used this 64 square grid to build out his own goals. I've kind of outlined in the page what I think about this, but what I'm going to do with this video is kind of walk you through how you can use this grid using a template that I've created that I think will be effective for a very wide range of athletes and specifically for coaches. So let's talk about that first, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty about the grid. So the first thing is who this is for. This grid is for people who are really, really self-motivated. So athletes who are really self-motivated to go in and do their own specific work of building out their own specific goals and ideals around what kind of athlete they want to be. It's an exercise that's going to take you some time. It might take you a few days of working on a piece and then coming back to it and working on a piece and then thinking about it and chewing on it. It's not a easy, light exercise. It's definitely something that's going to take some time to commit to it. This is also for coaches. So the reason why I wanted to do a goal setting matrix that was going to be a little bit more elaborate is because in years past, I've shared mental training tools and goal setting skills that are specific to individuals. But I think that athletes tend to be a little bit more engaged in the process of goal setting when they have a leader who's helping them through that. So this is an exercise that I think coaches could lead their athletes through, and I think it's going to be an exercise that'll really help shape the structure in a really clear way for your team. All of these Harada grids are only useful if you have an exceptionally clear goal. So I call it your audacious sport or team goal. If you're an individual, you're going to be writing down an audacious goal about maybe this season or maybe your career as an athlete. Shohei Ohtani made this about his long-term career, how he was going to build himself into the superstar that he is today. And maybe that's one of your objectives. Maybe you're an athlete that has aspirations to play on the national team or professionally, and so maybe that's your audacious goal. If you're a team and you're doing this as a team, I think one of the most common audacious goals to set is going for a championship. And it's not audacious because it's a rare thing for teams to want to go after, but it is audacious because only one team can be a champion in a given season. I'm going to assume that everybody wants to win and everybody wants to be a champion. So we're going to pretend like your audacious goal is to be a champion. Once you have that set, I've already built out kind of the template of the 8 squares that will go around your grid. The Harada works where all of these areas will then be outlined in a more specific way. So in this corner corresponds to this corner of the larger matrix. And then we flesh out various goals that we need to focus on in order to achieve that one quality. So what I've done with this spreadsheet is I've color coded it and I've created notes and prompts and things that are going to help you get focused. But what I've done specifically is I've built out what I think are the 8 qualities that are going to lead you to achieving your goal or at least achieving progress towards that goal. So I have my core 4 physical attributes that I think that every athlete needs to work on, every athlete needs to have in order to be successful. And that's stamina, skill, strength, and SPAQ. So stamina is things like fitness and endurance and conditioning. Skill are the technical skills, the techniques, the strategies, the fundamentals. Strength is everything to do with strength and core and stability and muscle resilience. SPAQ is really 3 things. It's speed, it's power slash plyometrics, and it's agility and quickness. So sort of if you wanted to simplify it, it's speed, explosiveness, quickness. And then there's also our core 4. These are sort of inner qualities. So the stamina, skill, strength, and SPAQ, those are sort of outer performance-based things, but these are sort of inner performance-based things. So it's character and core values and convictions and commitments. We'll dive deeper into what each of those are as we go forward. Next, I just want to talk about the order that I think would be best to work on this Harada grid. So we've created an audacious goal. Then I've actually numbered the order of steps just to help you stay on track with what I think are going to be the most obvious next steps. And what I did is I made the core 4 performance ones the first 4 things that you're going to work on. The reason why I think that is effective is our actions ultimately demand the behaviors that will help us to produce those actions. So if I am setting standards with regards to skill work or stamina work or strength work, the certain type of athlete who's going to be able to meet those standards is going to possess the character and the convictions and the core values to do those things. So it's almost placing the objective or the task ahead of the personality, quality, or characteristic that we need, because the task will generate the things that we're hoping to get. If we have those things firmly in place, it also helps us clarify the questions that we're going to be asking around character and convictions, commitments, and core values. So we'll start off with stamina. For each grid, I've made it so that you can highlight a note. The note will give you the prompt, and that's true for all of the grids. And what I've done is I've given you basically what I think should go in each of the squares, and I've color coded some things just to make it simpler. So we'll use stamina as an example, and then I'll quickly roll through the next one so that we can just be quick about and efficient with our time. So with stamina, I think your bottom three should be lower cost fitness or endurance metrics that can both serve as conditioning, but also provide like a weekly metric of fitness. And so what I think is good for this, I'll go back to basketball because it's a nice, simple sport to speak about. Maybe you have a 20-minute shooting drill that you track every single week, and that's a good fitness activity, but it's also a measurable activity. Another sort of stamina-based one that you could do every single week is something that's on the bike. So let's say that you have a bike test that you use as part of your conditioning. That would be a good way to do that. Let's go back to something like a volleyball drill. So in the volleyball drill, a good stamina type of exercise might be something where a team is having to do serve returns and play defense for like 3 minutes straight without very much rest. And that's just a grinded out type work. So there's a whole bunch of ideas that you could definitely put into this. I'm just loosely pulling these ones out of thin air, but I'm sure that you have exercises that you do every week that could become a little bit more measurable, and that's what you put down here. The next two up are going to be your actual major fitness tests. So these are things that you might test only 2 to 4 times a year, depending on the team. Some teams like to test these standards a little bit more frequently, but it's things like an 800-meter test or your 1 mile time, or a beep test or a yo-yo test. There's a lot of other tests that are great tests for endurance. Those ones just come to mind quickly. Maybe you have one that's really, really specific to your team. We create really specific ones for each of our teams at the school that I work at. So that would be what these two are. And what you're going to do is you're basically going to put down for your weekly fitness standards, your goal is basically just to do these every week and to make progress, and you can track that. So we need something measurable here. And with these, we want to actually have standards. So team standards, and then we want to have stretch goals. So our team standard, just to be on the team, just to wear the jersey, you need to be able to do this. But for us to win championships, we want everybody to do X. So I would have both of those. And when you write it down, so let's say that one of your tests is the a mile time. So you would write down 1 mile, and then you would go in and you would add a new note. And in the new note, that's where you would add in the added stuff like the actual standard for your team, and then the stretch standard. So the above three squares, this is kind of an interesting one. The above three squares are going to be the how we know we're fit. So this is, we're going to look at the actual gameplay, and these are going to be ways that we evaluate our fitness based on what we see in the game. So they can be stats driven. They can be things that you see in film. So I'll give an example with soccer. Maybe one of your metrics for stamina, especially defensively, is that you don't concede goals. So your goal over the course of the season is we are going to be the team that concedes the least amount of goals this season. For basketball, a good stamina statistic might be out rebounding teams or scoring in transition more than they do. Those would be good stamina based objects. For football, it might be something where your offense is capable of sustaining longer duration drives. So you're trying to average drives that are 5 minutes plus so that you can control the clock more. Maybe that's something that's a high standard for you. So whatever it is, you basically have some weekly endurance things. You have ones that you test on a less regular basis that are more your high performance tests. And then you also have some metrics that are game specific. The next thing you do is you move over to skill, and it's similar in structure. So I'll go through this one a little more quickly. The base would be skills that you would do almost every single day or at least every single week. So these are things that you think are important to your team or important to your development. I'll use basketball again. You might have a shooting drill that you do every single day. You got to make 50 shots. So you got to make 100 shots, whatever. As a receiver, when I played football, one of the skills I worked on every day was a daily and everyday drills with receiving. And then I would also do my everyday drills with my route running. So I'd have those skills that I do every single day. And that was something that was part of my everyday. But you might have other skills on your team that are really important. So let's say you're a soccer coach, you might have a passing drill that you do every single day because ball control and possession is really important to your squad. The next two up would be ones that you would determine to be skills that are more position specific or team identity specific. So let's say you're an individual doing this and you're a post player in basketball, you might have a couple skills that you work on a weekly basis or a regular basis that you're trying to improve. They have to be measurable. They have to be stuff that you can improve on and show progress. So for instance, if we're using that post player example, maybe you have a one-on-one period in the post every single week, and you are going to be tracking your wins on that. So how many wins that you get in a one-on-one scenario as a post. And then the top is similar to the stamina one. It's going to be evidence-based. So what are we seeing in the games that are demonstrating that the skills that we're working on are showing up in the game? So if you're always working on time of possession, ball control type things in soccer, then your time of possession is maybe one of the indicators in the game that you're looking for. After that, we're going to evaluate strength. So my bottom three exercises are going to be sort of baseline strength activities. And I think that having a core, a stability, and a body weight strength test are all really, really important metrics just to prove that you are truly strong, not just barbell strong, but truly strong. So having some kind of metric that you could do every single week just to prove that our bodies are still performing at the rate that we want them to. So as an example for core, you might do like a plank, or for stability, single leg balance. And then for body weight strength, you might do something like a dead hang or beats per minute squats or something to that effect. So it's something that you could do every single week, and you could track the numbers and you could see progress as an individual or as a team. The next two up would be explosiveness exercises that you would check on a regular basis. So maybe you have access to technical gear like velocity trackers or force plates. So you might use a velocity tracker on a bench press to check your upper body explosiveness, or you might use the force plates to do some basic jumps and just track your explosiveness on something like that. But if you don't have access to that, it could be something as simple as doing 10 broad jumps and taking the average, or even less than that, 5 broad jumps and taking the average, and then tracking progress over the course of the season from week to week to week. Or maybe you have a rower and you do a 10 pole test for distance, and you just tracking to see that your explosiveness, the watts that you're producing, are at a pretty high rate, and they're increasing as you go through the season. The top three would actually be your max tests. So I've shown a few max tests that you can choose from, but I would put an upper body max or relative max test, a lower body, and then a multi-joint power test. So as an example, we do bench press, we do a trap deadlift, and then we do a hang clean. But you could do something even less than that. You could do like a med ball toss for your multi-joint power test. For your lower body test, you could do goblet squats or hip thrusts. You could do for your upper body test, you could do rowing or shoulder press. It really depends on what your sport is and what you're trying to measure. But these would be like the stamina test, the endurance test. They're tests that you really only do maybe 2 to 4 times a year, depending on what you do for your programming. SPAQ is the exact same type of thing, but what we're doing on this one is we're going to divide it up into three areas. So on the top level, you're going to have a speed test, you're going to have a power apply metrics test, and you're going to have a quickness test. So you write those tests down, put down your team standards, put down your stretch standards. On the bottom, these are things that you could do on a daily or weekly basis that should be leaning into producing better results in this. So as an example, in speed, maybe every day you're doing power speed mechanics. So you're working on technique as part of your warm up. And for, let's say you do vertical for your testing, then maybe every single day you're working on skips or your RSI, or doing something along the lines where you're working on ankling and building, or even depth drops to work on landing better. And for quickness, maybe it's something like every single day you do some shuttles as part of practice, Or it could be something that you have like a 3-minute period in every practice where it's a sport specific drill, but it commands a lot of agility and quickness and speed and power. So something along those lines that could be measurable that you do every single day. So these are your every single days. These are your test once in a blue moon. And then again, the green is just something to remind us like, how can we measure this in the real world? So we should have some game like stats that can prove that. So for speed and power or quickness or whatever that is, maybe I'll go back to basketball again. Maybe transition points are your team's identity, and that really depends on how effectively you play defense and then how quickly you're able to score in transition. So transition points might be the one that you use for this. Another one for quickness might be if you're a defensive coordinator and you really have an identity of having a very fast defensive line, then you're going to be tracking your hurries, you're going to be tracking your sacks. So those types of things to measure how quick we are and explosive we are off the line. So those are the four performance-based ones, and we're going to jump into the next few steps here. The next few steps are going to be the inner-based ones. But as you can see, if we're tracking our endurance, our skill, our strength, and our speed, agility, quickness, power, we're tracking all those things. Just by having those measurables is going to create a level of accountability, and it's going to create a level of discipline and a level of focus that we already want to be creating in our athletes. So even just having those, the next part of this is going to seem really intuitive. And that's what's great about this, because we can be asking questions about our character, our core values, asking things like, what type of a person who has the character to be able to achieve the standards that we've set? And I think that's a really valuable question to ask, because if you're achieving the standards that you set, those standards should really be helping you funnel into your audacious goal. If your standards are too low to be able to reach championship level, then yes, you're going to make your athletes better, but no, they're not going to be able to rise to meet their goals. So you need to be able to stretch or create stretch goals in each of these four categories to help your athletes develop to a point that they can win. So the next step is looking at character. So these are qualities or characteristics of someone who hits your goal. So you're going to think about the end. What does the end look like? Somebody who's capable of achieving a championship, what qualities do they have? And what you're going to do is an exercise where you write every quality that you think somebody who hits this goal has. And then you're going to organize all of those qualities into basically 5 categories and title them. And those are going to be the 5 characteristics that you want every athlete or you want yourself to be able to embody in order to have the character necessary to achieve all of the other physical elements. So that's character. The green at the top, again, is how are we seeing this come to life in the real world? How do I know that we are a team that has a high level of focus? Maybe it's that we never have issues with athletes going to class. Our athletes are really good at going to class and being on time and showing up for things because their focus level is so high that it extends to everything. Or maybe another characteristic is being bold. So you're going to reward things that you see in practice that are bold. You're going to notice those things. And so you're going to define what that looks like in a practice or game scenario. So those characteristics should be measurable, and we're going to create metrics up here in these 3. So we want a way of knowing, and you're going to write out something like we want X number of this per week, or we want X number of this over the course of a season that demonstrates the character that we have. That one might take a little bit more time. It might be a bit more challenging, but that's that's part of the hard work here. The next one is core values, and core values differ from characteristics in just a few ways. Characteristics are the qualities or virtues that you're expected to live by or be known for as a winner. But core values are more of the priorities, the things that we have to be focusing on, the things that are the most important in order for us to be able to achieve our goals. So they're big ideas, they're big time values. So where a characteristic might be something like poise or discipline or self-respect or respect, those characteristics are great. A core value might be things like teamwork. We need to, if we're going to achieve this goal, it's going to take teamwork. Or another thing that it might be is we value courage. We want our athletes to be courageous in everything they do. So courage could fit both as a characteristic and a core value, but When we prioritize it as a core value, it means that everything that we're doing in our practices, in our lifts, in our games is through the lens of what does it look like to live these values well, to be the types of courageous people. So it could show up in both character and core values, but these tend to be a little bit broader, and these tend to be a little bit more specific about how we are versus what we prioritize. And again, we want to have real life examples of how we're going to measure these core values. One of the ways that we do this is we talk about it at the beginning of practice. I want to see this core value being lived out, and I need to see 5 examples of it today. And I need you guys to tell me what those 5 examples were. So I need you noticing these core values. So it's about creating language around the values that we live by. One of our teams actually does a quick reflection at the end of their practice where they do value shout outs. So somebody who is noticing a value in a teammate and then shouting out what that value was that they lived well. Another example would be to create like monthly challenges for core values. So let's say one of your core values is inclusivity. What is one way that we can be more inclusive in our environment outside of practice? And you create a little challenge for that. And then you set a goal to have so many of your athletes be able to do it, or all of your athletes be able to do it in the course of a month, so that you can work towards living your values more concretely throughout the weeks and the months of your season. So this is hard work. This is the inner work. This is the work that is going to lead to growing more in the character and the values that are necessary to achieve the standards that you're trying to achieve. So we're defining these inner states so that we can have these outer outcomes. After that, we go into convictions. So convictions are essentially a fancy way of saying beliefs. What you're going to do in these grids, so these next 2 grids, is you're going to use each corresponding square with the corresponding unit in the matrix. So I'm going to write a belief statement about stamina and a belief statement about character. So as an example, I might say, we are the fittest team in our conference. That's that we believe. We believe that we're the fittest team in our conference. And then we believe, or I believe, that I will never come off of these 5 tenets of character. I believe that if I focus on these tenets of character, it's going to lead me to be the kind of person who can win games or win championships. When it comes to skill, we believe in the fundamentals. We believe in hard work. You're going to do that for all of these, including this square, which is a belief about your beliefs. So you're going to have to come up with a creative way to describe that, what you believe about your convictions. And we believe that all of these convictions are necessary for us to achieve our goal. Maybe that's an example of that. You're also going to do the same thing, but you're going to do this with commitments now. So commitments are more like team standards or rules or non-negotiables. You're going to do the same thing. What are your rules or non-negotiables when it comes to stamina? We never give up on a play. That may be a rule that you have. We always get to the line in our conditioning drills, go past the line in our conditioning drills. We always finish drills hard. So that might be an example for a commitment or a rule when it comes to that. And you're going to create rules for every categories, including rules about your rules. That if we break any of these rules, so that's kind of what I would use this square for. If we break any of the rules that we have, these are the consequences. So that's what I would write in this square, what the recourse is for not living up to the standard or not living up to the rules. And so then once you have this entire matrix done, you will have all of your standards for endurance or stamina. You're going to have all of your standards for skills. You're going to have all of your standards for strength, all of your standards for performance qualities. And on top of that, you're going to have an outline for the type of character you want all of your athletes to be able to have and ways of measuring it. You're going to have an outline for your core values as a team and ways of measuring that. You're going to have belief statements that you can come back to on a regular basis so that you can remind your athletes or remind yourself what it is that you really believe about what you're able to achieve with regards to these other grids. And you're going to have some rules. And I truly believe that even if this isn't the best way to use a Harada grid, it's a good way for you to make a lot of sense of this process and to get a lot of value from it. And I believe that if you do this, it will undoubtedly lead to progress. You'll have a lot more clarity around the different things that you want to work on as an individual or as a team, and you're going to have a lot more thoughtfulness about what goes into creating success for your team. Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoy this process. I hope that you take your time with it. If you're doing it as an individual, it's probably going to take you a few days. It's going to take some time to actually go through this. You may want to hammer it out over a coffee or whatever. And I think that's also a great idea. If you're doing this as a team, I think this is probably going to take more than a few hours. You're probably going to have to set some time aside as a team, have a long team meeting, buy some pizza, sit around and really hammer out all of the things that you want to be about. And once you have these things nailed down, they aren't in stone. There's some of these things are going to be a bit more fluid from year to year, but you're going to have a really great rubric about what makes a team successful. And what's also great is if you're not successful in a given year or you don't reach the audacious goal, you can go back and you can evaluate what areas did we lack in? Did we not nail it on our skill development? Or were we not as disciplined as we said we were going to be? Did we lack elements of character to help us do all the things we wanted to do? Which rules did we break and break too often? Or did we actually live up to our core values or try to develop those? This is work. This is hard work, but so is winning a championship. It doesn't happen by accident. So I think that this is a really great rubric to help you get yourself going and a great model for you to be able to come back. Once you've created all of your grids, you've added your notes to each thing, you've titled all of your grids. This is something that I would share with every single one of my athletes, or if I'm doing this as an individual, this is something I would share with my coach so that we all are on the same page about what we're about and how we're trying to achieve this audacious goal. Thanks for your time. Thanks for doing this work. I hope it leads to the success that you're pursuing. And good luck with all of your endeavors and your goal setting in the future here.